Simon's a prolific painter. He's constantly creating paintings, always creating a very cohesive body of work. And you recently, I guess about, when did you graduate?
Yeah, actually just a year ago at
A year ago,
point.
right.
Yeah.
Simon graduated from UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
I was studying painting with John McNamara, who we're showing next door in our other gallery. So Simon, why don't you just give us the lowdown, what you've been up to, talk about your installation.
Yeah, thanks Matt.
Thanks
for that introduction. Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out on a Thursday evening. I guess I could just first talk about the title of the show. It's called Swaddle and Surrender. It's based off of when my daughter was young, when she was first born. I used to wrap her in blankets, and that whole thing is called swaddling. I don't know if any of you have kids, but anyway, yeah. So I was just really interested in like how the patterns on the blankets would like overlap, and like you're thinking about like drapery and like how it can be kind of dramatic, how things cross over, and a pattern will stop and then like stop into the crease and then continue elsewhere. I always thought that was a really interesting kind of way to look at movement. So that was like one of the inspirations for the show and the work, and basically the process in which I make the work. So a lot of my work is based off of her and my relationship with her, and then from that, why would I make a painting for my daughter to look at is me dealing with my own like personal history and my family history as well, and using the mode of abstraction to kind of encapsulate all of that information, which is a lot and gets confusing. So I think abstraction is probably the best way to kind of share that within a painted surface.
How old's your daughter, Sam?
She's 6 now. She's in kindergarten, finishing up next month.
What do you think of your paintings that you're making for her?
Like I would oftentimes show her the work, and she would just like, sometimes she'd be like, I don't know what that is, and I don't know. And then other times though, she would like point out stuff, and sometimes I'll ask her to title a piece. The one piece that is, I guess the bigger piece, that is 2 panels, the diptych that is of cut wood. I asked her to name that, and she named it Snake Valley, and I thought that was appropriate because I've also been, in looking at my own like personal history and then my cultural history, I've been looking at different parts of Vietnamese culture, and I was looking at patterns and traditional ceremonial garments from Vietnam, and I stumbled upon these really colorful garments that were also like, there's a lot of like wrapping that happens with those garments, and I thought it was like really appropriate with like the swaddling and all of that. And there was a particular region of central Vietnam that had these really beautiful garments, and that was the initial attraction. And so I wanted to read and like find out more about those garments and that history and that culture that was in the central Vietnam. There's the people in the Central Highlands are also called the Montagnards, which are I don't know what that means in French. Is it like mountain people? I don't know. But so I was looking at their history, and so it's interesting that like it was like the aesthetics that got me drawn into it. And then learning about it further, I was reading about the ethnography of the Central Vietnamese people, and in that the book talks this book that I read talked about the colonization of that area and how the Central Vietnamese people were resisting the French. That was like in the 50s was the specific time that I was reading about, and one of the acts of resistance came from this village leader. His name was Sam Bram. He was kind of like a mystic, and he claimed that his daughter gave birth to a python, to the python god, and he made all these proclamations, one of which was, if you drink the water that this python lives in, you will be invincible to French bullets. So that was like really intriguing, and like that was an interesting connection with the python and with Snake Valley and all of that, and that how that kind of like comes up. Obviously, my daughter's not reading about that ethnography, but just to have that sort of like very loose connection was enough for me to kind of, I don't know, it just pushed me to make the work to encompass all of this stuff. Like my work is very much like a stew. Like you just throw in a bunch of ingredients and you stir it up, and then you get a spoonful of something different every time you scoop. But
Simon likes to make stew as well. We were going to make stew this evening.
It was
Maybe
just
next
a
time.
logistical nightmare. But so yeah, I'm looking at all these different things, and that's where the abstraction comes from. It's not just like a formal interest in color, although that I feel like because the work is very colorful, it's very inviting. But the subject matter, I think, has some depth to it, and so that became enough for me to work in this mode, and I've been working in this mode for a couple years now, and just really like fine-tuning it. Yeah, so I'm just really interested in depicting movement within color and looking at like Hans Hofmann's like color theory of like the push and pull with like warm and cool colors next to each other, and how like at times the cool color will be more in the forefront and the warm is pushed back, but then of course there's this fluctuation that happens, and that's just been a really interesting thing. And just looking at other like color theory and how we associate different memories with different colors. So just throwing all that together, the work becomes kind of nostalgic in a way because of the color palette. It reminds me of something that happened in the past, or like a part of my childhood.
Is that with that hot pink and orange color combination? Say the piece behind you, for example.
Yeah. I've been really interested. I really like hot pink. It's always been like that, and my daughter loves pink, and I'm just like, yeah, we can get along. So oftentimes when I use pink, it's as like a nice like a standout color.
I feel like I've seen that color combination in maybe traditional garb of Vietnam, or even maybe even pop culture. Product.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of like really bright neon colors in the traditional garbs, and I think it's really interesting because those bright colors coming from I don't know where they come from, but like they're you're in the jungle, and I guess you might be I'm assuming it's more green,
Sure, a lot of green.
So like for these colors that really stand out, much like maybe like some of the animals in jungles, that some of the birds would really stand out. So yeah, I thought that was really that was a big drive for me to use color.
It seems like it's almost a reaction to the overly green environment. I saw this similar thing in Indonesia, at least traditionally, not in the cities, but in the countryside. It's really green. It's just so lush, so green. And I've even heard of expat Westerners getting some kind of green sickness or something, just like being overwhelmed by this green. And these stark contrasting colors are almost intentional. To like,
right.
to kind of like
Have this,
separate,
yeah.
yourself from all of that green.
Yeah, because like all like having so much color, it seems to be like very like artificial, right? Like you don't really see all of those colors in nature all at once, maybe in the ocean or something. But yeah, so it's and the work has become like this show in particular has been like a departure from a direct figural representation, but I feel like the figure is definitely represented in the shapes that I paint. Thinking about being swaddled, and like so these like bean shapes that I paint start to represent the figure. If you think about swaddling and like how they're really the forms are very economized after being wrapped, you know. So yeah, so definitely like a lot of the wall painting is in reference to the figure. I feel like, and seeing the interactions of them and seeing how they would dance on the surface became enough for me. And I'm also thinking about like Richard Tuttle and his approach to I guess maybe minimalism, with seeing some of his paintings where they're like I saw one wall painting that was of like a geometric shape that was just barely a different shade than the actual wall, and looking at that and thinking about depth in that and how it could be so subtle, you know.
Sure.
So and I think there's a certain subtlety in some of the pieces, but more of it's just very in your face. And I'm also interested in layers and how like the physical layers of paint and how that happens. In my work, my work is very spontaneous and in a sense with the parameters of, you know, dipping into my own personal history and such. But informally though, it's very spontaneous, where I'll start off with some like full body gestures and to kind of reference the figure, because you're using your whole body in a sense, like, and it's coming through the brush. And then from there, like any frayed parts of the mark, I will put another shape on top of that. So it's almost like band-aids that are kind of accumulating, but the texture of the frayed marks will kind of pop up sometimes. So it acts as like scarring, and I think there's like an interesting metaphor with all of that in combination. So that has time and time again has been like my motivation to keep on painting, to kind of cover up the mistakes and the blemishes, and then the final product, or the product that I show in the gallery, becomes this you could see the process in a way there. And then sometimes I'll have windows in the painting where you see the very first layer, and I think that's really interesting to kind of show where you've been. And once again, another metaphor is attached to that. So yeah, so there's like the smaller paintings were very much inspired by that magic water that that Sam Bram made up this fantastical story about, and so that was really intriguing. So there's a lot of things that I'm pulling from, and it gets confusing, but I like how it becomes confusing, because like you're pulling all these different kind of symbols and signs and putting them all together, and of course they become a different thing after the combination. And I think that speaks to human nature being not just one thing, but a multitude of things.
Looks like you brought in a little bit of a shrine element in the corner installation as well.
Yeah,
sculpture, the kind of corner sculpture.
Yeah. I'm very much interested in ritual and ceremonial pieces, and going to like Buddhist temples. You're going and seeing like how you go to a Buddhist temple, and like all the rugs on the floor and all the tremendous ornateness of that experience is I'm interested in how all of that creates this like transcending spiritual experience. So trying to kind of think about that within the work too is something that I'm interested in and trying to articulate in one way or another. And I oftentimes paint these kind of feathery marks, and that's usually from like a sumi brush. You can get like a fine tip to a wider mark, all within one stroke, and I think that's really interesting. And there's a sense of movement within those marks that have been really interesting to me. So, yeah. I guess I can, and the movement also like I've been asked before, and I've told you, Max, that like some lady asked me like, so what's your work about? And I said it was about being Vietnamese American, and she's all like, I don't, what part is Vietnamese? And I told her, well, I'm a Vietnamese American artist, so I think my art will reflect that one way or another, and I think that's honest, I mean, the part of like my personal like family history that I feel like I'm trying to extrapolate through the paintings is the sense of movement and like the sense of assimilation, like my parents moving to America because of the Vietnam War, which is also another like part of my work, is trying to make sense of something that was like I'm removed from, but it's basically the reason that I exist, I guess, here. So I'm looking at all these different things and trying to.
Do your parents ever talk about the move, and do you know much about?
I mean, it's not something they talk about on like daily, and it's something that I don't really. Yeah, I talk to them about it every once in a while, and I think. Like my dad used to go to flea markets all the time and swap meets and buy stuff secondhand and then bring it back and refurbish the stuff, and that's kind of what I do with my paintings too. Like some of my paintings, like I've shown in the past or shown them in one capacity or another. Like I'll cut them up, and that's basically what that shrine is like a painting that I showed, a couple paintings I've shown here last year. And then I cut out the pieces that I felt like were frayed, and then kind of patched things up. And I think that that comes from my father and like his influence. He used to buy me toys for Christmas from garage sales, and like I'd get them in Ziploc bags. And he got me the He-Man castle.
Cool.
It was
I never had that.
Yeah. It was actually Skeletor's castle, and he made marks with a marker on it, all over it, as if to like battle damage or something. And I just thought that was like so, like at the time I was just like, why?
You ruined it.
Yeah, just rubbing alcohol. But that sense of like that touch, just like I'm going to give this toy a new life, or just, I don't know, it just really became something very important to me, and then comes out in the work that I make. And like for the longest time, I was just like, I'm not going to paint. Like if I show something, that's it, it's done.
Yeah.
And then just coming to this connection with, with what my dad's done with stuff, it was just like, well, it's just like, no, the painting's never done, and I could always add more layers to it.
Or cut it up and stick it on a wall.
Yeah. Why not? Like I made it. I can do whatever I want with it, basically. Unless you buy it, you pay me money and I'll stop. So, yeah, so that's been I mean, whatever that's worth, I don't know. I mean, but it keeps me going, and it becomes more about, the act of making it versus just like working for, like, oh, I have to show this, and like, so like the installation, I could easily just keep on adding to that, the wall, and just keep on painting. But it was a mark of time, just this is what I did in a certain amount of time, and that's that, and I think that's interesting, these like temporal kind of environments that are made, so.
So if left to your own devices, would you keep coming in every night and filling the room up to where we couldn't get in anymore?
Yeah. I would cover up the walls with cardboard, and like you wouldn't even
The door
know.
wouldn't open.
Yeah. Yeah, or I devise like some sort of trap kind of thing where like a bell would ring. Anyway, yeah, that's sort of the next show. Yeah.
Let's look forward to it.
But yeah, did anybody have any questions or anything? Yeah, but so yeah, the work is about all of that stuff. Like last year, it was very much like I think it was going into a very serious place, the work, where it was talking about the Vietnam War and talking about herbicides and Agent Orange and the rainbow herbicides, and that kind of like stuck with this work because it's all colorful still. But I think this body of work is a little more playful in a way, because of like really like focusing and thinking about my daughter and like how like her role in the work or in my life and how I translate that, and yeah, I can use that as a driving point to make work because it's my work, and like it. But your interpretation of it could be something completely different, and I think that's perfect, And then, but we can have a discussion about where we're both coming from, and I think that's the beauty of like showing work in a gallery setting and having people come in and look at your work. Yeah, it's these dialogues that you can have. But yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for your sincere and playful installation. I mean, that's wonderful, yeah. And it definitely has a different flavor from your last show.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes next. Yeah.